So in 2004, I was asked to go back to India. But a month prior to going to India, I needed to go to the doctor and get some blood work. I needed to get some shots. I was in a hurry, I had the suit on, I was all trying to move and rock and roll, didn't have time for these tests and these shots, but I went to the doctor and they gave me my shots, and they also drew some blood. They drew some blood for an HIV exam. The doctor took me back into her office and said, "I'm sorry, Jerry, but you just tested positive for HIV." I was doing well, and now 20 minutes later I found out that I have HIV. At that point, when you receive a death sentence, basically, that's what I perceived it to be at that time, you really learn to say, hey, you know what? I'm either going to allow this to make me bitter or make me better. And so I decided when I got on that plane a month later and went to India to the youth camp, I was going to go public with my story that I had HIV. 450, 500 youth. And I said, if this has made a difference in your life, I just want you to stand up. I want you to come forward. I want you to do something. Everybody but 7 people stood up. And it was at that point in my life I realized that I had a purpose in this disease. I had a purpose in what I had gone through. I realized that my story was a voice of strength. Every day I want to make sure that I'm a voice of hope in whatever I'm doing, because at the end of the day, that's all we have is hope.
He's been taking his story to Africa, India, and prisons and schools right here at home. Jerry started the Hughes Foundation in 2004. They fund an orphanage in Namibia and sponsor youth camps in India. But the most important part of Jerry's work is sharing his story.
So by the end of that year, I decided I'm going to start the Hughes Foundation. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't even know how you form this thing. I just knew I had a passion. And I went to India. And I spoke, and I met all these people who were living with HIV and AIDS. At that point in my life, I was like, wow, floored at all the devastation caused by one disease. It's very weird to say this, but it's affected me in such a positive way. When you help anybody, when you help people in life, you're always blessed. And you're always given back tenfold what you think you've given. And so when I can speak into the life of a child or a youth or a woman, my life is so rich.
Those that don't know about the name, for those that didn't hear about it yet, just a brief background about the foundation.
Well, basically, I started the Hughes Foundation in 2004 after being infected with HIV myself. It just came out of a passion, and I wanted to do something, make a difference in the world for those who are affected by HIV, because we're all affected in essence. Like, there's 42 million people living with HIV worldwide. Where are they? And I wanted to know, who are these people? What do they look like? And I couldn't find them. And so it was, by the end of that year, that's when I started the Hughes Foundation. And that's when I decided I'm not going to let these statistics stop me from living. And so I started living. And since then, I've gone around the world. We all have gone through something bad in our lives. And we are motivated by people who we see who have turned something that was meant for bad into good. And when I went to India and I met a woman in the slums who was no more than 50 pounds, who was sitting in her own waste, who was dying. She had no medication, no doctors, nobody to help her. And I just stumbled across her through a friend who had heard me speak and said, hey, I need you to meet this lady. And her husband had passed from AIDS, who had, in essence, given AIDS to her. And going and sitting next to her in her bed, and you've seen the pictures. And she can't speak English. I can't speak Hindi. And this is where like the power of love really comes to play. And I remember touching her. And she'd not been touched for so long because no one would touch her. I touched her, and she just began to cry. And she started telling my friends in Hindi that she thought everybody in her life had forgotten about her, that no one came to visit her. And here comes this man from America and sits on her bedside and touches her and says that, hey, I'm living with HIV too, and I love you. And she just cried. She broke down after that was translated. And it was no more than 6 to 8 hours after my visit, she passed away. And you know, those are the success stories that I can say that woman at her very last hours passed knowing that she did matter and that she loved. And maybe I couldn't help her circumstance or couldn't provide her the medication and give her what she needed. But imagine a lot of people die alone in that situation. They die with no hope at all. And those are the stories that I carry with me around the world. Those are the people that define success for me.
People can identify with my story. Stories need to be told in life. Whatever someone's going through, you are lovable, you are beautiful, and you have a purpose in life. Really want to come across loud and clear is to love yourself. Even if your parents don't love you, your family, love yourself. Because there's a plan and there's a purpose for your life, no matter where you're at or what it looks like. There's a plan, there's a purpose, and it starts with you.
I was on a hip-hop station, a radio station in Namibia this past November, and I was sharing my story. It was to the masses. It was to millions of people, millions of households, and you don't always know the impact you're having on someone's life instantly. So I get back to the States. A man who had heard my story on the hip-hop radio station, he was in the process of committing suicide because he just tested positive for HIV. And he was listening to this, and he stopped what he was doing, and he did not commit suicide because of that story. I think our words have the power of life or death. There's power in what we say. And what I was saying that day was that HIV doesn't define who you are. It hasn't defined who I am. It's just something I live with. It doesn't define who I am. And so this guy heard this and was like, well, dang, I was just tested positive. If he can do it, I can do it. And he didn't commit suicide. That's success. That is success. That's powerful when you can see that. Yeah. It makes everything you've gone through worth it. Every struggle I've gone through is worth it for that. If I die tomorrow, I die a happy man. There's nothing else you need, you know?
free.